Totally Football Show today, Champions League, big first day thumpings and no returns because they don't exist anymore. We go inside Bayern's number 9, hear how Celtic ended the summer of Bratislava, discuss why Zeno de Bas should be simply called Simply, and get more midweek conclusions. Then Premier League match day 5, Man City face Arsenal and the pick of the other fixtures, and Toto Less Football Show, we salute Salvatore Schillaci. Thursday, the 19th of September. Listener, thank you for joining us. On board today, hello, Duncan Alexander.
Hello, James Richardson.
Tom Williams also with us. Hello, Tom.
Hello, James.
And it's Colin Millar.
Hello, James.
Making it 3. How you doing, Colin?
I'm very well. I'm slightly fatigued from a busy week of football.
Yeah, because you took the busy midweek and added some Carabao Cup to it as well, didn't you?
Yeah, and some La Liga, some Eredivisie. Yeah, there's a lot of football going on this week. I think a lot of people might have missed just the volume of games, and it's the fact that it's spread across so many competitions. And of course, for this week, we also have Champions League football on a Thursday as a rare treat.
We're going to be talking about the first 2 nights of the new Champions League format. Looking ahead, as I mentioned, to match day 5 of the Premier League. 2 days out of the initial 3 done with 12 matches played. Any thoughts on the new format, Tom?
Yeah, I think the first thought that occurred to me is that this competition's name is destined never to actually make sense, in the sense that when it was launched in 1992, it was for the champions, but it wasn't a league, and now it's been relaunched. It is a league, but it isn't just for champions. That aside, I think sort of the enormity of the competition, seeing the league table for the first time, and the realisation that the sort of mission creep of the Champions League is well underway. You know, the big clubs have kind of got this sort of version of a Super League. And I remember having the distinct thought that when we come to sort of January in particular, and those pivotal matches that decide which clubs go through to the last 16, which clubs go into the playoffs, which clubs are knocked out of European competition altogether, that all domestic football is at risk of being sort of sidelined while all that's going on. And I think that could
more than the group stage used to do.
I think so, yeah, because there should be more jeopardy. Occasionally in the Champions League in recent seasons, you've got to the final round of group stage fixtures and there have been 1 or 2 big clubs who needed a result and who would maybe rest players for the preceding league game, etc. Whereas because of the new format, you could have like multiple big clubs who desperately need a result to stay alive in the Champions League. And seeing the league table and kind of, beginning to engage with the competition for the first time, I've sort of began to realise that it could be more of a tipping point than I perhaps thought.
It might mean more later on. I felt this week meant much less than an opening night of a group stage would mean, because 2 reasons. One, because if you mess around with the formula, it automatically, I think, loses authority. I mean, that's what tournaments base their importance on, the tradition, the repetition. And the second thing is that when you have a group stage, because I look at the fixture, I think it's just kind of wild freestyle jazz. I don't know what anything really means. When you're in a group stage, every game is a 6-pointer, no? Because if Inter draw with Man City, they've got the return, they made Man City drop 2 points. Whereas now, what does that actually mean, that game? I don't know.
I mean, in some respects, I think it's quite fun because, like, games like City Inter or Milan Liverpool, they're sort of one-off big games. But also at the same time, it also feels a bit like one of those pre-season tournaments in America where it's just a random selection. And there's no, like you say, there's no more Man City Inter until the knockout stage at least. So yeah.
And one of the things about this as well, obviously, there's 64 more matches to get to the final 16 at the end of the day, whenever the playoffs are done, than there were in previous versions. And I mean, obviously, that in itself, as a quick explainer, is sort of like UEFA's reaction to the new FIFA Club World Cup, which is almost like a new competition in itself and its expansion. So there's a lot more football games in general. We have players this week. Rodri came out about it. Barcelona's Jules Koundé said last night that, people need to start listening to footballers because there's a possibility we could go on strike. We have the power to do this. And there's a lot of discontent, I think, within football players, within coaches, I think within a lot of fans as well. There's just a lot going on, especially with the ticket prices for a lot of these games. At Aston Villa were the sort of English club that were in the news about that, up to £97 for tickets for these matches. And you sort of think a lot of these clubs at an executive level might actually almost prefer to go into that two-legged playoff rather than go straight through, because that means they've got extra games and extra income coming in through this tournament. And I think when you look at teams like Young Boys, who obviously Aston Villa beat midweek, and Dynamo Zagreb, Red Star Belgrade, they're going to be getting so much money from this competition in comparison to their domestic rivals. And that's essentially, in one hand, it's a good thing that money's being spread across Europe, but because it's going to just essentially one club in each of those countries, it's skewing their domestic competition so much. So there's a lot of concern.
Not in the case
I think,
of Young Boys, who are currently bottom of the Swiss league.
Well, after 6 games, but they have won 6 of the last 7 titles, and this is a club who aren't naturally the biggest club in Switzerland. And you look at Celtic's dominance in Scotland and so on and so forth. You've got a lot of these clubs who've essentially created hegemonies in their countries, and that, I think that in itself is a concern of how much, as Tom sort of alluded to it there, like domestic football is slowly starting to lose its authority over its own clubs.
I think Celtic's a good shout on that as well, because I think it does suit teams like Celtic. I think they've got a much bigger chance now of getting through to at least the playoff round. But yeah, it's going to sort of subsume their kind of interest until at least January, if not further. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's been talk before of countries like Scotland and Scandinavia and Holland sort of combining their domestic league, but yeah, as Tom said, seeing it as one massive league table it's a whole new ball game.
There you go, actually. Nice. Thanks, producer Charlie. Let's get some headlines from the opening 2 nights of the first round of matches. Man City drew 0-0 with Inter in perhaps the biggest game of the opening set of fixtures. Kevin De Bruyne, though, going off at half-time in that game with an unspecified injury. All the other favourites won. Villa 3-0 at Young Boys. Liverpool 3-1 at San Siro against Milan. PSG victorious against Girona, but only thanks to a last-minute goalkeeping howler from the ex-Spurs and Fulham goalkeeper Paulo Gazzaniga, who let Nuno Mendes' low cross slip through his legs. There were 3-1 wins for Real Madrid against Stuttgart. Third goal for Real coming from Endrick, who's now their youngest ever scorer in the Champions League at 18. Juventus by the same scoreline at home to PSV. Celtic had a club record 5-1 win against Slovan Bratislava, and Bayern had a Champions League record 9-2 victory over Dinamo Zagreb, featuring an absolute banger from Rafael Guerreiro. Ooh, there was some beauty. Some beauty.
There were some belters.
There were, weren't there? I mean, that was lovely because Musiala doing the kind of flicking it on with his chest. What else was nice? Yildiz' goal, the first goal of the new Champions League season.
Not only is he wearing Alessandro Del Piero's number and playing in Alessandro Del Piero's left-sided attacking position, but he cuts in from the left and curls an absolute pure
alla Del Piero
shot.
And then the goal celebration, tongue out alla Del Piero.
There you go.
Very nice.
Perfection.
Zeno de Bast.
Woof. Meaty.
De Bast with De Blast.
Yeah,
it was
nice.
a stunning shot.
Stunning.
From a central defender. I think it's particularly satisfying with a defender who's sort of just gone a little bit AWOL and just let fly into the top corner. It was brilliant.
His first ever goal.
What?
As well.
You're kidding.
In football. And it's the
Thanks
third...
for specifying in football.
Yeah, just in case. He's a very handy water polo player as well. But no, first ever goal in football, and it is a first time 30-yard shot into the top left corner in the Champions League.
Madness.
He should never score again, deliberately. I want to see him passing up opportunities.
Much like Darmian, for example, who might be on a similar kind of vow of abstinence.
Yes.
When he raced through against Man City on Wednesday night. How about Amadou Onana for Villa against Young Boys? That was a bit of a...
Also very nice. And John Duran's goal that was ruled out was a beauty. But didn't count.
He got booked for the celebration, which is kind of a curious,
curate's egg booking.
Existential booking. That.
Yeah. If you're celebrating a goal.
He also looked comically stunned when the goal was ruled out, despite the fact that the handball that preceded it by Amadou Onana couldn't really have been more obvious. I think he probably thought that enough time had passed between the handball and his finish, but...
VAR doesn't forget or forgive.
VAR does not forget.
It was an interesting game, that, because for the first 20 minutes, Villa were all over the place. They really couldn't cope with the artificial turf, I don't think. And it is, I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I find it really disconcerting seeing top footballers twisting on artificial pitches.
We'll talk maybe more about Man City later, ahead of their game with Arsenal. They were shut down. There were late chances for Gundogan, but plenty of chances for Inter as well. the Nerazzurri doing an absolutely bang-up job of everything except finishing, really, at the Etihad, and certainly keeping Erling Haaland quiet.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Thuram was offside about 17 times in the first half, and you thought if Inter can just get the right pass here, or if Matteo Darmian cannot pretend to or attempt to reinvent himself as Karim Benzema when one-on-one with a goalkeeper with that sort of ill-advised backheel attempt, then there's a goal for them. And obviously, they didn't score.
For Guti that time, didn't it?
Sorry, Guti. Let me say that again. That's the reference I wanted. And if Matteo Darmian could have avoided, trying to pass himself off as Guti with that ill-advised back heel when he was clean through on goal, then there was a goal for them. But obviously, they didn't score, and ended up having to batten down the hatches a bit. But yeah, I thought they nullified City pretty successfully.
I mean, you say that, but I don't. I mean, obviously, we got one of the classic Guardiola. His team didn't win, and he's more happy than when they do.
I love my team.
They did get 2.4 XG and missed 4 big chances. So on another night, I think they probably would have won. But yeah, it was a bit, it was a high quality European 0-0 draw.
It also feels like ahead of their game against Arsenal that stylistically a team who are happy to who are a top level team who are happy to sit off them and kind of exploit set pieces and hit them on the counter attack. It feels like this is a good tactical, almost like a dry run for City, because this game probably doesn't really matter that either of these teams drew. They're probably both going to advance ultimately through this group or through this league phase. So I mean, if you're going to draw 0-0, it's probably the first game, sort of get it out of the way. Probably the toughest game that they might have.
Michael O writes in, says, should the new City jersey be added to the list of charges?
Yes, unquestionably.
Well, we'll touch on it. We're going to have David Mooney of the Blue Moon Man City Football podcast later on, and hear what City fans make of it, and the font, which apparently, I didn't realise this, that is Noel Gallagher's handwriting. Right. I'm not sure if he's done them individually or if somehow through the magic of computery. Anyway, that was a game that doesn't matter according to Colin, but you're going to add something else?
I was going to just say very quickly on that Man City kit that I think most people probably know this, but it's based on the Definitely Maybe album cover, and there are 2 footballers on the album cover of that. Rodney Marsh is one.
Throw it as a quiz, come on.
And who, do we know who the second is?
George Best.
At the behest of Bonehead. Paul Arthur's, it's obviously his birth name. The bassist of Oasis. Hang on a sec. So it was strange that George Best featured on that. But I think the story was that the Gallaghers sort of admitted that, George Best maybe transcends football a little bit, whereas Bonehead was a Manchester United fan. But Best and Marsh both played for Fulham. So maybe the Definitely Maybe album cover would be more adequate for.
That's fantastic content.
And
Duncan, you were at Main Road for that concert, were you?
In '96.
There you go.
I was.
All right.
Credentials. Just lastly, on the Definitely Maybe cover, City to announce the launch of this Noel Gallagher designed kit did a photo shoot in the living room. And it's one of the band members' living rooms, I think, or like the band members' auntie or something. And they, I think it was like Guardiola and I know a couple of players, and they.
De Bruyne's there, I think.
Yeah, De Bruyne's in there, and they basically sort of remade the.
Who's lying on the floor with the glass of wine?
Is that De Bruyne? Maybe.
Maybe.
Guardiola, I think, is sitting on the sofa, but they replaced the George Best picture with Colin Bell. I think they made sure that there were 2 City players in the photographs, which a bit small time, but
there you go. Well. Moving along, Milan manager Paulo Fonseca is definitely maybe heading out the door. They're already unhappy with him. They did get a win at the weekend against the worst team in Serie A, Venezia. But then on Tuesday, they took the lead against Liverpool and then lost 3-1. The fans put up a big banner. No, the fans chanting at the end, "Fuori coglioni," grow a pair, basically man up. And all of this was watched by the man who took Borussia Dortmund to the Champions League final last season, Erdin Terzic. He was there in the stands observing. I don't think he was there on a holiday, is the feeling. Anyway, Milan play Inter in the derby on Sunday night.
And Fonseca did great things at Lille. Like the sort of feeling was that of course he's going to leave Lille. Like his time has come. Like Milan is the right sort of stature of club for him to be, going into. Lille played fantastic football, sort of overachieved a little bit. Relative to their resources. But yeah, obviously.
He struggled at Roma though, didn't he?
He did. A difficult situation. And I think Tuesday night they were playing a Liverpool side with a point to prove after their defeat at the weekend. Liverpool certainly were fantastic?
Yeah, they obviously started in the worst possible way. I mean, people were surprised to see Tsimikas playing at left back, and he did sort of lose his mind for Pulisic to score. But then in a kind of weird first half, the two fullbacks assisted the two centre halves, which doesn't happen. A goal contribution for each member of the back four at half time. What a lovely moment.
The full Tony
That's
Pulis.
quite Inter, to be honest. That's quite an Inzaghi trademark football. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and then carried on the second half. I thought Cody Gakpo was really good, like playing on the left, which he hasn't had much of a chance to do for Liverpool. Kind of weird because that is where he generally excels. So yeah, I think that was a positive. I think he might keep his place going forwards. I mean, Slot was slightly dismissive of Luis Diaz after the game, saying that he would have played Gakpo there against Forest, but he was a bit tired. So yeah.
Okay.
And one of the I said questions about Arne Slot going into Liverpool was that, you know, he's obviously a very good coach. A lot of people have a lot of good things to say about him. One of the things that wasn't clear was how he would react to adversity. Certainly when you're at such a big club and there's such a spotlight on you and things start to go wrong, how do you respond to that managerially? And obviously the defeat to Forest at the weekend wasn't ideal, and then you go 1-0 down in Milan after 2 or 3 minutes, and you sort of think that could unravel. But there was quite a good bit of analysis done on this whenever analysing the goal that they conceded. They were so wide open for that Pulisic goal, but a lot of that was to do with their midfield pair of Ryan Gravenberch and Alexis McAllister, and certainly the lines between them and the defence was just far too much. But they made a bit of a tactical tweak and they came closer together immediately after that, and Milan just couldn't get out and they were penned in, and it was dominance. Like, it was total dominance in that match. I was surprised just how one-sided it was. Obviously Milan have been in pretty poor form, leaked a lot of goals, but for them to be so easily undone by 2 set pieces would be really disappointing from their point of view. I think that's probably the thing that maybe their fans just can't really accept, that maybe, you know, we don't have players that are as good as Liverpool, but we could certainly try to nullify them a bit better from that point of view. And yeah, I mean, after 5 games, I think James Horncastle at the end of last season, whenever Milan were linked to Julian Lopetegui, was saying that Italian football, it's kind of a little bit adverse to the head coaches who don't have a background in Italian football, and they're a bit dismissive of them. And I know Paulo Fonseca was at Roma for 2 seasons, but he's sort of outside of that bubble as well. And there's almost like whenever things start to go wrong there, people are automatically thinking, right, well, you know, maybe it's time to make a change. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond to that, because they've got a lot of very talented players in that team. But again, it looks very unbalanced at the minute. And yeah, Liverpool were impressive, but their opposition could have been slightly tougher, I think.
All right. Inter will be Milan's opposition Sunday night. Elsewhere in the Champions League, opening 2 nights, you had Bayern's 9-2 victory over Dinamo Zagreb. Duncan, I know you love a unique scoreline. Have we had 9-2s before?
Not for a while. I mean, there was one in League 2 last season.
In the Champions League?
No.
Never. Is that the most goals that any team has scored in the Champions League?
I think 9-2 might be one of those scorelines that we don't yet associate with like one particular game. Like, there are certain, you know, like...
Well, the last time it happened in the top flight in England was in the early 60s. Spurs beat Forest 9-2, but no one ever remembers that, do they?
Tom, your tweet at the time, I'd 9-2 be the person who waited too long to make your tweet about this game.
Yeah, I was thinking of like I'd 8-2 be a Dinamo Zagreb fan, and then they scored the 9th. 15 likes, James.
Did you...
There's no
get
respect for wordplay these days.
In real time tweet construction advice from James Richardson online, like I did?
No.
I was at a loose end that night. What can I tell you? So that Bayern, though, that's 4 wins out of 4 for Vincent Kompany, and 15 goals scored in 2 matches, because they put 6 past Holstein Kiel at the weekend. Harry Kane in this match Sorry?
He was fuming.
Harry Kane scored 4 goals in this one game against Zagreb, 3 of which were penalties. 3.
Yes.
3 were penalties. Yes. Michael Olise got a brace in his first Champions League appearance. There was a little bit of jeopardy when Manuel Neuer went off at half-time. Sven Ulreich came on and kind of wasn't. Dinamo Zagreb pulled 2 goals back. But yeah, 9-2. Emphatic.
I don't know, there's something weird. Like, 9-2 doesn't sound as good as it should, does it? Like the 2, I think the 2 impacts the 9 quite a lot.
Right.
I think like 9-0 or 7-0. 7-0 sounds better than 9-2. 9-2 just sounds silly.
Does it?
Yeah. I think it undermines. I think Bayern are in
goes
trouble.
Up to 9 though.
Well, there was that. I mean, that time when Dinamo scored twice at the start of the second half, and I was like, oh, what are Bayern doing? They're collapsing in front of our eyes, and then they just go and score another 6 goals. But they had a couple disallowed as well for offside. I mean,
Zagreb?
No, but Bayern Munich.
Bayern,
So they were just
why?
running through the defence midfield. It was again, I think Dinamo Zagreb. And this is probably a common theme, like young boys as well. They're teams who play quite a high line, but defend a high line against players who are sort of quicker, stronger, and are so adept at breaking through that just find it really difficult to defend. You get really high score lines in a lot of these.
Yeah, I mean, City have got to play Bratislava at some point. I think we could see some quite outlandish scores this season.
Could we see the 10-goal mark broken?
I think so.
Wow.
And with goal difference being the decider, there really is an incentive to punish.
I don't like it.
Teams like in brutal fashion.
I just
What
this is. It doesn't feel like. I'm just used to the group stage. I miss the group stage.
It doesn't feel fair that goal difference could decide it whenever they're playing totally different sets of teams. I mean, it just seems
But then
bizarre.
I guess you could say that it wasn't fair before when you would have a team that wouldn't go through on 8 or 9 points and another team would creep through on 6 points just because they were in an easier group. But there you go. Dortmund, 3-0 winners at Bruges. Bruges had the early chances in this game, but the introduction of Jamie Gittens, within minutes of coming on, he had scored a brace, the second of which is electric football, dazzling footwork. And then there was a penalty, which, to be honest, listen, I don't know who scored. Guirassy, says producer Charlie. And then there was a penalty scored by Guirassy, his first Dortmund goal, which made it 3. 3 goals for Juventus, who beat PSV Eindhoven, who were on a 5-game winning streak prior to this. And as we mentioned, Kenan Yıldız's opening strike was a bit special. Weston McKennie and Nico Gonzalez with the other two there. I mean, there was loads of football. Anything else we should be mentioning from the Tuesday, Wednesday? You got Arsenal, Atalanta on Thursday, and also Barcelona going to Monaco, which could be an interesting one. If you're hearing this ahead of Thursday's games, listener.
Barcelona, who lost 3-0 at home to Monaco in the Johan Gamper Trophy / pre-season friendly. The only thing I was going to mention was the PSG Girona. The Paulo Gazzaniga error is a howler for the ages. It's egregious. Basically, PSG had been battering Girona for the entirety of the second half. Gazzaniga had pulled off like a couple of really good saves. A board for stoppage time minutes is about to be held aloft. Nuno Mendes gets forward on the left for PSG, puts in a cross that gets deflected towards goal by a sliding Girona defender. Should have been the easiest gather of the night for Gazzaniga, and he does a full-on through his hands between his legs, trundles over the line, and PSG end up with a victory that they probably deserved on the balance of play, but in VV fortuitous fashion.
You can take the boy out of Gillingham, but you can't, etc. and so on.
Spurs fans will thank you for not saying Spurs.
Yeah.
There's a very nice little story here for Girona. Christian Stuani, formerly in Middlesbrough many years ago, hadn't started a league match since November, but he started this game and he was captain because of a promise that the Girona head coach Michel had made to him last year. If they were to qualify for Europe, he would be leading them out as captain, and he did. And that was highlighted by the excellent Spanish football blog site Football es la Leche, which technically translates as football is milk. I don't know if it's in your book, Tom, but it's like the business.
I'll add it to the next version. Christian Stuani, who I note still hasn't figured out how to spell his Christian name correctly.
I mean, I think as a player, you probably prefer like a big win bonus than a sort of, you can be captain. But, it's a nice gesture.
The fairy tale clause.
Very nice. Well, as I say, there's more games on the way on Thursday, and then next week it'll be Europa League. What's that, Celtic fans? We haven't mentioned your record win in Europe yet. No, that's true. Wednesday night, Celtic taking on Slovan Bratislava. And Colin?
Yeah, Celtic ran out 5-1 winners. This was a landslide victory. Obviously for Brendan Rodgers, who had the worst win rate of any coach who'd coached more than 20 matches in the Champions League, with only 3 and 24 before last night.
Was Celtic really good, or are Slovan Bratislava not very good?
I think Celtic were very good, but one of the issues here was against Slovan Bratislava played with a high line, and Celtic exploited that. Also, Celtic were quite good in set pieces. One of the things quickly from this game as well was that Liam Scales scored the opening goal for Celtic in this match. He was the first Republic of Ireland international to score in the Champions League since Darren Gibson from Manchester United against Schalke 13 years ago.
Gibson.
And later in the game, Adam Ida scored, who's another Republic of Ireland international. So two came at once. And also, obviously, Celtic haven't won a Champions League or any European knockout tie since, I think it's 2004. So it's two after the group stage, or the league phase as it is now. So they've obviously had a lot of problems in Europe, but Opta have said that they have statistically got the easiest or the most favourable draw of any of the 36 teams in this league phase.
Really?
They still played Dynamo Zagreb, Club Bruges, Young Boys. So they've actually now got a really, really good chance.
The only easy team they don't get to play, of course, are Celtic.
Well, quite. And they've obviously got now a pathway whereby they're probably fancying a playoff.
Do you think halfway?
spot.
Because I think wasn't Opta's line that you needed probably around 9 points to make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, to get because basically anything from 24th upwards will get you into the playoffs. So
Yeah.
I'd say no. So
Who's next for Celtic then?
they have got Dortmund. Next.
Dortmund, okay.
Away.
Away.
Paul Lambert.
Derby.
And also for former player chat, the top three as we speak in the league, Champions League, which is not that pleasant to say, are Bayern, Celtic, Aston Villa. Alan McInally must be absolutely loving it. Played for all three clubs.
Brilliant. Who, if Celtic got the easiest draw, according to some boffin somewhere, who got the toughest one, Colin?
It's a good question.
can't remember.
Is there a site that'll tell us? Okay, hold on a second, friends.
I only heard who were 36.
No, because that's interesting. Because to be honest, I was watching the action with my son yesterday, and he was saying, "So who's got? What are people saying? Who's got a good draw or a bad draw?" I have no idea. I've no idea.
Well,
Okay,
Celtic have got Dortmund, Atalanta, and Leipzig, who are the tough games, but it
Yeah.
seems fairly generous, I think.
So Celtic have got the easiest. Then Bayern.
this
then
is according to who, Duncan?
to the boffins at Opta, my
Okay.
former friends.
Right.
Well, some of them are still friends, but Celtic, Bayern, Dortmund, Barcelona, Villa have got the five easiest based on
Okay.
sort of ranking of other sides. The hardest,
Yes.
Paris Saint-Germain.
Ooh,
And
who've
then
they got?
They've got obviously. Well, this isn't in order, but they've got Barcelona and City from pot one. They've got Arsenal and Atletico Madrid from pot two. Salzburg and PSV from pot three.
Okay,
and,
Salzburg who got absolutely tonked this week, but yes.
Yeah, and then Girona obviously already played, and Stuttgart from pot four. That is quite tricky. Liverpool got the third hardest actually.
Have they?
So yeah,
Go on then.
You want them?
Go on, let's have Liverpool's fixture list.
They've got Red Bull Leipzig and Real Madrid from pot
Yep.
one. Leverkusen and Milan from pot two. Lille and PSV pot three, and Bologna and Girona from
That's
pot
not.
four.
I don't think it's that tough. Don't think it's that tough.
Boffins in the mud, claims Richardson.
That's what I'm saying. Anyway, that's enough Champions League for now.
Well, it'd be remiss of us, James.
This is the problem with an expanded competition, UEFA.
Yeah.
These podcasts will go on
It's
forever.
too much to fit in. But, the experience of this new Champions League format was
Yeah.
slightly tarnished for some of us watching at home when we tuned in to watch our beloved goal show,
Right.
only to find ourselves watching some...
A reimagined show. Anyway, I mean, I can't comment really, but
Well, we can comment for you, and I think we have.
there you go. Progress, Tom. Football match is on, and we will do two. As next up, let's move on to a bit of a salute to Salvatore Schillaci. Lovely stuff, Tom. Sad news from Italy on Wednesday morning. Listener Toto Schillaci passing away at the age of just 59. He'd been unwell for some time, of course, and Schillaci, as I hardly need point out, probably the man who I think symbolised Italia 90 for people all over the world. And it's hard to think of a player who encapsulated, who embodied a tournament, any tournament ever, the way he did that magnificent competition. He was the hero of Italy's run to the semi-finals, which they lost on penalties to Argentina. Scored in that game. But I don't know what it was about him. I mean, whether it was his kind of wild-eyed approach to playing, the way that he celebrated his many goals, like a figure who'd just been hit by a fusillade in a Goya painting, if you know what I mean. Or the fact that he came, for most of us, out of nowhere. I mean, even the Italians he wasn't expected to be playing, but he came on in their first game to rescue what was a goalless draw against Austria and never stopped and really embodied the Italians' passion and desires in that tournament in which they'd staked so much.
I think he's really popular in England as well, and probably Ireland as well, because that tournament it sort of bubbled out of nowhere, and he kind of embodied that in the same way that, say, Paul Gascoigne did as well.
Yeah.
And neither of them ever played in the World Cup again, so it was just, he was, like you say, just a sort of force of nature. And sometimes football's like that. We got used to Messi, Ronaldo being great for 2 decades, but sometimes great footballers just appear like a...
Well, you had that Italy team as well, which was kind of impossibly glamorous in their Diodora togs. You remember Zenga? Or you have Brazy at the back looking a little bit more unkempt, but Zenga behind him, immaculately coiffed with that silver jersey,
and Aldo
looking like a
Serena's
space keeper from the future. You have Baggio, you have Vialli,
Aldo Serena's weird sideburns, which fascinated me as a child.
And then through all of this, out of nowhere comes this kind of wild dog of a striker. And the Italians fell in love with him. Scored against Republic of Ireland. Scored against pretty much everybody, including England. Tom.
And also his name. I mean, in this country, in the Anglophone world, I mean, Schillaci sounds like a name that you make up for yourself if you want to make it sound like you're really good at football. Just like a great name to hear, like yelled out by a commentator when he scores. And I mentioned this on Twitter, but my first football memories are of Italia 90. I think Schillaci's name was one of the first footballers' names I ever knew. Schillaci, Maradona, Hullet, Gascoigne, all the stars of that World Cup. Roger Miller as well.
Higuita. He was very popular in my playground at school.
But I mean, I think someone who, for people who remember that tournament, I think particularly for people who were sort of, for whom that tournament is a formative memory, like Schillaci just, is a name that really resonates.
And obviously, you mentioned, James, that he scored against Republic of Ireland in the quarterfinals, which was the only goal of the game, and that brought an end to their first ever World Cup campaign. And you kind of think, maybe he's a figure that they, maybe don't associate with overly positively, but actually he became a bit of a cult legend in Republic of Ireland because his name was so synonymous with that tournament, which they obviously had so many happy memories from. And he actually starred in an ad for the Irish Ale Smithwick's in 2002.
For the what, sorry?
The Irish Ale Smithwick's. I don't know how familiar.
Oh, right, a beer.
Listeners would be with that particular brand.
Not the aquatic creature.
No.
Gotcha. Well, he did a lot of TV work. I mean, notably in later years, with a new head of hair, he appeared on the Italian equivalent of Celebrity Love Island, and was, I think, the people's choice, even though he wasn't the people's choice because he didn't win in the end. But he was the revelation of that competition in much the same way he'd been, to a greater extent, of Italia 90. I was fortunate enough to meet him once, says she, because after he had, I guess you would say, we had an amazing season, a couple of seasons with Messina under Zdenek Zeman in Serie B in the second division, which saw Juve snap him up, and he had a great season going into the World Cup, which is why he got the call up to be kind of Vialli and Carlavadi's reserve, and exploded. After that, never really recaptured those heights. Ended up moving really early to Japan, actually, in 94, to Jubilo Iwata, with whom he won the title. And then he came back to basically run the soccer school where he'd himself kind of come through in Palermo. And so, I don't know, sometime, I guess in the late 90s, he went down to Palermo to talk to this kind of iconic figure. And it was really nice because he was such a gentle, kind of simple bloke. I felt he was shepherd-like. It was like going to meet a shepherd up on a mountain, and he'd be kind of simple, rustic ways, but, just passionate about his craft and, his flock with the young footballers, etc., and so on. And off he's gone to the big football meadow in the sky. And he was one of the nicest parts of the tournament. That means, I think, more to anybody than any other tournament.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not saying that the World Cup that year influenced the Ballon d'Or, but the top four was Mateusz Schillaci, Andreas Bremer and Paul Gascoigne, so yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, runner-up in the Ballon d'Or. He was the Ballon d'Or, the golden ball of the World Cup, because that was the award for the best player of the tournament, which, given some of the other names in it, was pretty impressive. And, of course, top scorer in that as well with 6 goals. But, did so much more than just score goals in that tournament. Toto Schillaci. All right, next up, on to the Carabao Cup third round. All right, some ties in the Carabao Cup third round this week. And Metmen say there's more on the way next week. Colin Millar, you've been watching this. I put it to you that among the highlights were Preston North End winning. Was this the longest penalty shootout in football history? Was it?
English
32
club history,
kicks?
yeah.
Yeah? 30. So what was it? 16 each?
16,
High
15,
scoring.
it finished.
16, 15.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, 16 penalties each, yes.
Okay.
Because you had that epic Champions League penalty, or Champions League Europa League penalty shootout between Ajax and Panathinaikos.
Yeah, this is
which was 34 attempts.
Oh, really?
And there's quite a lot of missed penalties in that one, though. So
This got to 32.
It was 16-15, so it was
16,
the
15.
first time the magic 16 goal mark had been reached in a shootout involving
What
an
drama.
English club.
So, sorry, I didn't actually watch this. So the players going around there to people who've been... If you miss your first one, do you get a second go?
Another go, yeah.
Yeah, you do.
But with a bit more.
I feel it should whittle them down.
Yeah. Yeah, like Squid Game.
Yeah.
Fine.
That saw Fulham exit the competition, also leaving the Carabao Cup in the third round, where Everton, who lost again. Brighton beat Wolves 3-2. Spurs were 1-0 down, heading into the 88th minute away to Coventry, before a dramatic come-from-behind win. And Man United beat League One Barnsley 7-0. 7-0! A much more satisfying scoreline than that one. It's the first time they've won 7-0 since they beat Barnsley at Old Trafford in the Premier League back in 1997. Colin, you watched this. You also watched the Spurs game.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, look, the Man United one's less of a story. I mean, obviously...
Is it? 7-0?
Well, I mean, yeah, Barnsley, a League One team, that was a very good win. But obviously they were expected to go through. I think the main thing for this is how these matches, not so much the result, but more so what they can do to players' confidence, and probably no more so than Marcus Rashford, who we all know has had a pretty tough sort of 12, 18 months, but scored on Saturday against Southampton, scored twice here, looked really good, he looked really focused, he looked like he was enjoying his football again, which is good to see. I think from a Manchester United point of view, he played centrally in the sort of central forward position in this match rather than out wide on the left as he usually does, and it's interesting in the sense that obviously Højlund's coming back in, Rashford's now played there, Xerxes played there a little bit this year, Mount started the season there, Bruno Fernandes in this sort of false nine position ended last season kind of in that similar-ish role. So Manchester United now look a lot more tactically flexible in attack than they did throughout the entirety of last season when they were pretty predictable, had very limited options. So things are starting maybe to come together for them a little bit. Obviously very tentative after just 1 or 2 victories, but positive in general for them. Less positive for Tottenham, I think. Okay. I watched this game and Tottenham were atrocious. They were genuinely very, very bad.
What was so bad about them?
Well, they made changes from the game against Arsenal. And whenever I watched the game against Arsenal, I sort of thought, well, that wasn't actively a bad performance. But if you're a Tottenham, so you can't really get angry if you're a Tottenham fan. You can't really, you just think it's just the way it was. We got sort of maybe tactically outsmarted a little bit, it's fair to say. Arsenal sort of did one on them, as the phrase goes. But Tottenham weren't that bad. But in this game as well, you just sort of think, what is the point of what they're trying to do? Because they've got upwards of 70% possession. In the first half, they didn't even have a shot on goal. They were very susceptible to counterattacks because of the high line that they play. And I really, really like Ange Postecoglou. I think he speaks directly. He speaks quite well. He connects with a lot of fans, I think, in how he speaks. But last season, Tottenham were a fun team to watch, right? Even when they were winning, when they were losing, at least they were entertaining for neutrals. I look at them now and I just think it's almost like reached the phase of meaningless possession where it doesn't really go anywhere. The ball's being constantly recycled. Players are almost taking more risks in defence than they do in attack. They play a very high line, which leaves them very exposed to sort of route one football, which worked very well for Coventry in this game. Coventry should have scored more than one goal. It should have been out of sight. And Jed Spence and Brennan Johnson scored 2 goals in the last 3 or 4 minutes of that match to flip it on its head. And Brennan Johnson, I think, it's a very nice story because he's had a lot of abuse on social media from his own fans as well. I think, and that's
from the derby on the weekend.
Yeah, and I think preceding that as well, he's just had a tough time. I mean, he was a big money signing from Nottingham Forest. He's maybe struggled to adapt a little bit, but he seems to become a little bit of a target. I'm not overly sure why that would be, but he's deactivated his social media accounts and things like that, and it's just never really nice to see. So I mean, he got the winner in this game, and Tottenham last season went out at the first hurdle against Fulham in the League Cup, at the first hurdle against City in the FA Cup, obviously weren't in Europe. So this was actually the first cup game that Postecoglou won. But the fact that they made 8 changes for this match, it kind of makes me think, as you compare to Man United, who played a pretty strong team against Barnsley, play your best players, because this is Tottenham's best chance for a trophy. Why? What are Tottenham aiming to do this season? Surely their fans want to win a cup.
Well, and so does Ange, who was asked, do you usually win something? He said, no, mate, I always win something in my second season. Tom?
Yeah, I thought it was noticeable that Brennan Johnson didn't celebrate at all. Actually looked quite miffed. He scored a 92nd minute winner to get his team out of a real hole, and didn't even crack a smile, which suggests that, the abuse that Colin mentioned has an impact on him, which is obviously regrettable. I think the issue that Johnson has is that he's a very dynamic footballer, very quick, very creative. His final ball occasionally lets him down. His shooting isn't all that reliable. He's not as clinical as, Tottenham fans would like him to be. And I think that's why he gets it in the neck. Obviously, I am #biased because he's Welsh, but he is obviously, a footballer with huge potential. So you'd hope that he can get over this. The thing that stood out for me the most in this game, however, was the fact that Coventry have got a player called Norman Bassett, which I thought was remarkable. I was like,
just because it's none more
name.
70s, 80s football.
Yeah, but he's actually Belgian. I suspect it's probably pronounced Norman Bassett. But on the highlights that I watched, the commentator was like, "Oh, here's Norman Bassett," and I was like, "Hang on a sec, this can't be right." But Norman Bassett. He is a Belgian youth international signed from Caen in France over the summer, and looked pretty lively from what I saw of the game.
There you go. Ooh, Fulham and Preston North End in the longest ever penalty shootout in an English Cup competition. The same time you also had one of the lowest scoring penalty shootouts in recent memory, as Stoke, who are without a manager at the moment, beat Fleetwood 2-1 on spot kicks.
That's bad, isn't it? Come on.
2-1.
That is bad.
That's remarkable.
Everyone scores penalties these days.
And these days, yeah.
Catenaccio for penalties.
Crystal Palace beat QPR 2-1 without the aid of spot kicks. And Everton, as I mentioned, got knocked out on penalties by Saints, with Ashley Young missing the decisive kick. Yikes. All right, what's going to happen with them and the other Premier League sides on Matchday 5? We'll get onto that in the final part of today's show. Listener, it's been a long one, and I salute your endurance for making it this far. This is where the good stuff happens, though. I would suggest, as we delve into the delights awaiting us on Matchday 5 of the Premier League, you got the top 2 in the league facing each other, Man City and Arsenal. You've also got all the promoted clubs plus Everton facing each other too. So that's fun. It begins Saturday lunchtime with J-Lo's West Ham facing Chelsea, a derby. There's derbies at 3 o'clock Saturday as well, as Spurs take on Brentford. And in the Midlands, Aston Villa face Wolves. At the same time, you've got those 2 promoted sides, Saints and Ipswich, facing off, while the other side that came up, Leicester, will take on bottom of the table Everton, for whom, Duncan, 2-0 really is a dangerous scoreline. Liverpool host Bournemouth, and Fulham are up against Newcastle, a game which could see the Magpies go top of the table for 24 hours if they win it. At 5:30, you've got Crystal Palace against Man United, and then 2 games on Sunday. Brighton against Nottingham Forest, both of whom are only a point off the top 4. And then Man City and Arsenal. Woof. We'll begin with the game at the Etihad. Man City and Arsenal are the top 2 teams over the last 2 seasons in the Premier League, and they go head-to-head this weekend as the top 2 again. We've had a lot of chat about Arsenal and their hopes and their frustrations. Man City and Arsenal have been the top 2 teams in the Premier League over the last 2 seasons, and they go into Sunday's clash in those positions as well. What a dramatic game it could be, or not. Joining us now for a little bit of a Man City perspective for once is David Mooney of the Blue Moon podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Massive.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. Massive week this for Man City with Champions League, the hearing starting, of course, on Monday, and this Sunday, the team that shut you down last season. So, City are the club everyone's scared of, but how worried are City fans right now?
That's interesting, actually. I'd not thought of it that way. I think because it's early in the season, it's quite. It feels like there's like if this week goes wrong, there's plenty of time to put it right. So there is that. I think when you watch the game with Inter this week, Inter defended really, really well and really deep, and they made it really difficult for City. That's exactly what Arsenal did last season in that 0-0 draw. And it'd be interesting to see who's available for it, because if De Bruyne went off on Wednesday with an injury that we don't know the extent of. Be interesting to see if he's not available, Odegaard not available for Arsenal, whether this ends up being another one of those games where the two managers are actually quite conservative and cancel each other out. In terms of whether anybody's worried about it, I don't know. I think the fact that there's a lot of time left in the season. City, if City lose on Sunday, that's not going to be the end of the title challenge, and it's not going to knock them out the title race. So I think that leeway probably takes away some of the nerves, to be honest.
Okay. We're waiting to hear, as you say, about how Kevin De Bruyne is going to be. The other kind of bad news about Wednesday night's game with Inter was, I think a lot of people felt the kit, David. How do Man City fans feel about the kit?
So this is, as far as I can tell, a real divider among the fan base, because it seems to be, the story is that it's the fastest selling shirt on day one of a shirt that's been released. Second only to, I don't know if you remember, we played in the Community Shield against Liverpool in 125 years anniversary. Like proper, like old school 60s style blue kit with a white trim. And that was really popular. And I think that's the only kit that's outsold this one. Let's be honest, and let's make no bones about it. It's ghastly, isn't it? It's absolutely hideous. It looks like if I was in the ground, and it felt like, where in the old days when someone used to put a magnet towards the TV and the colours would go all funny. It was kind of like City were playing in a kit that should have been normal colours, but somebody had done that.
Right. I'm pretty confident that at a certain point, I'm not sure if it was Foden, passed to a steward.
Yeah, there was. I remember Akanji, a friend of mine from the press box, texted me to say what happened there, because Akanji just passed it out of play, and I was like, yeah, he's passing it to the linesman. It's just like you're at home, you should be in blue. It's. In fairness, I've done a bit of this for the Blue Moon podcast this week. Actually, City have a bit of a history of not playing in their home colours at home. It's not as rare as people might think. But at the same time, they should play in blue, shouldn't they? They're at home playing blue. It's not difficult, lads.
Okay. Generally speaking, and I'm not sure if this is something that you touched on in the Blue Moon podcast, is there a feeling that's crystallising, particularly this week, with off-field things involving Man City, that everyone's out to get you?
You see, there's different opinions among the fan base. So I understand why a lot of fans would say that everyone's out to get City. That's been the prevailing feeling for 15 years or so with the way that financial rules have come in. A lot of City fans would say, that they never looked at these spending rules when other teams were the dominant force. Why now? And you can understand that if you don't agree with it, you can understand why people would think that. In terms of the hearing and how everything's going, I think a lot of City fans are done with it. A lot of City fans are just kind of like, give us the outcome, whatever happens. Let's move on with it. We don't. There's a sense of, certainly, I can't speak for everybody. I can only really speak for myself, but I'm exhausted by it. I just don't. I'm at the point now where I've kind of had my fill with it. I can't keep going back to the same well again and again and again and again and going over the same ground again and again and again. Again and again. Guilty, punish them, get rid of them, and do whatever needs to be done with them. If they're not guilty, find them not guilty and move on with it. Like, whatever happens at this stage happens. I think there's a can of worms that gets opened if City are guilty, and then the discussion moves on to, well, what's the punishment and how severe should the punishment be and all this sort of stuff. And I just I'm in the mood of just like, wake me up when it's over, because I've had enough of it. And if City are not guilty, then the discussion just moves on to, well, we all know they got away with it, and we all know that the Premier League couldn't just make the charges stick. We all know they did it, and it's just like, I'm kind of done with that tribalism. There's much more. I'll still go to the football. I'll still watch the football wherever City are. I don't need City to be successful to be, making podcasts and going to the football and watching them. There's so much more that football fans could channel their energy into that would be more important. We've just seen, the Inter game's a great example from a City point of view. The City ticket prices for that were far, far too high. We've seen Wolves fans, we've seen Villa fans, we've seen West Ham fans all upset about their ticket prices. If all these fan bases put the same energy in working together and getting the same sort of energy that they do into criticising or demanding that something is done about City, when something is being done about City, they are being investigated. There is a hearing that is ongoing right now. If that same energy was put into kind of more useful things, maybe football would be a better experience for everybody. But we're stuck in tribalism land, I'm afraid.
Well, David, wise words. Those are the real Man City charges we should be worried about. The ticket prices. Listen, have a great game. I won't ask you any further. We'll wait to see what happens and catch up with you further down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to come on anytime.
David Mooney of the Blue Moon podcast. Wake me up when it's over, he says. Read the charges. And it sounds like he feels that could be the line on Sunday's game as well. He wasn't very optimistic about the chances of a spectacular clash.
Yeah, well, they were two forgettable games last season, particularly this equivalent fixture, and then in April, was it? Finished 0-0, and Arsenal basically sort of strangled the life out of the game. And I think the feeling was that, this was evidence that Arsenal could, go toe-to-toe with City and sort of compete with them and nullify them. And the Etihad, as we know, is a stadium where Arsenal haven't won since 2015 and have had some, pretty awful results in the past. So it felt a little bit like, a step forwards. Come the end of the season, you look back at Arsenal's run-in, and having only dropped points in that game against City and in the home defeat against Villa, you thought, well, actually, if they'd won that might have been the difference. They might have won the league. So,
do they need to win this one, Tom?
They obviously don't, but it would send out a big message, wouldn't it? Though, sound the cliche klaxon, if they did, because they've shown that they can go to City and compete. They can go to City and contain them. Obviously, missing Martin Ødegaard, which is quite a big blow. But if Arsenal could win this, it kind of puts them back in the driving seat. And
very much so, yeah.
This sort of pursuit of City that has been underway since the beginning of the season before last, and they came so close in 2023, and then they came even close in 2024. You can't kind of keep that momentum forever. You need something that is going to convince the players, the fans, everyone else that this is going to be the season. We are going to get on top of City. So, I'm sure they'd take
Tom
a draw.
Says a draw is
it would
not
probably
enough.
be a draw, but if Arsenal did win, it would feel pretty significant.
Title race ends this weekend, unless...
You heard it here first.
What you have to say about Arsenal is that their defending has reached a sort of a level that we've not seen for a good couple of decades, I would say. This year in the Premier League, they've played 11 away games since the start of January. They've let in 3 goals. The 3 promoted teams have already let in more away goals this season than Arsenal have in the whole year. So we know they can go away to City and keep a clean sheet. They've got to score. I think they could, but obviously, I wouldn't be surprised to see another 0-0 draw. But I don't think. I think there's a slight narrative now of like, well, if that's the case, it's a letdown because this, should be an end-to-end humdinger. But I think we've been spoiled over the last few years with some high-scoring Big Six games. And actually, if you look at what a title clash should be, it should be a cagey back and forth. That's what people
heritage.
reminiscing about the 2000s a lot these days. Well, that's what your Chelsea, Liverpool, your Chelsea, Arsenal games were like back then. So
it could be a KG game, but not a KD
game.
No, actually, I'm not going to go with that. That doesn't work. KDB, we don't know whether he's going to be playing or not. We do know that Declan Rice will be back from suspension, and the only question there is whether he or anybody of the Arsenal team pick up injuries in Thursday night's game away at Atalanta. But as it stands, Colin, are you going to throw your neck on the line and say Arsenal are going to win this one?
No, okay. I'm not going to do that. I would agree with Duncan that this is. I made the point. I think Arteta's Arsenal is the best defensive English team since Mourinho's Chelsea in this first spell, and they're just incredibly good at shutting games down and getting the result that they want. I mean, I think a draw here would definitely be better for Arsenal than it would be for Man City. I mean, it definitely would be. I mean, these home games are big, and
and Arsenal's first 3 away games, away to Villa, away at Spurs, away at City, the fixture computer doesn't like them. But if they get 7 points out of that, I think no matter what Tom Williams says, I think that's decent.
Well, City, after this game, have Newcastle away, and if KDB's absence were to be, as we enter the realms of conjecture, a long-term one, that could prove significant.
I think Arsenal will miss Odegaard more than City would miss De Bruyne. I don't think De Bruyne's been tremendous for the last sort of 18 months.
And they did play without him quite a lot last season.
Yeah.
City.
Martin Odegaard only missed 5 Premier League matches in his first 3 seasons. He's been there every game for Arsenal, and he's so influential in what they do in attack.
With and without the ball as well. His pressing is off the charts.
Was it Gundogan who came on for KDB?
No, Foden came on for
Foden came on for KDB, right? Yeah. So,
and he's back, and he's quite good.
And
Rodri started against Inter for the first time this season. And Jack Grealish looks like he's back in favour and sort of trying to beat fullbacks every once in a while, rather than just systematically looking at the fullback and then passing the ball backwards to Josko Guardiola. So that's nice to see.
There you go. That is Sunday's game at the Etihad. By the way, you've probably seen that the WSL season kicks off this weekend. Actually, on Friday night at Kingsmeadow, the standout fixture of the weekend is also Man City at Arsenal. This time it's Arsenal who are the home team. City, who were memorably pipped to the title by Chelsea last time around on goal difference, will be down at the Emirates Sunday lunchtime. A game which will feature Arsenal's star player, or erstwhile star player, Vivian Miedema, who's the all-time top scorer in the WSL, but who's left the Gunners over the summer. Who's she joined? Man City, of course. So on a free transfer, she possibly could be playing against her partner, Beth Mead, who's still with Arsenal. All sorts of storylines there. Chelsea champions, as mentioned, they've got new management. Emma Hayes having done one to take over the US WMT. And she's been replaced, Tom Williams, by
Sonia Bonpastor, the former Lyon women's coach.
And then this ties in with Salvatore Schillaci. Bonpastor means good shepherd.
There you go.
Doesn't it, I think?
It all
should do, no?
Oh, sorry, in French.
Yeah. Is she any good? You spoke to her for your book, Va Va Voom.
Yes, I met Sonia Bonpastor at the end of season before last.
Right.
When she was at Lyon.
Did it make you think of sheep?
No, it didn't. It didn't at all. Well, thanks, Duncan. Racist. But I had a very enjoyable hour or so in Sonia Bonpastor's company. And she is, she's sort of, French women's football royalty. Played for Montpellier, who were one of the sort of the pioneer clubs in the French women's game. Played for Lyon, made over 100 appearances for the national team. And I think there's a feeling that when you sort of look at things from a slight distance, that whoever is coach of the Lyon's women's team is just guaranteed to succeed because they, have sort of dominated French women's football for the last 20 years, similar in the Champions League. But when she took over in 2021, they had just come off the back of a trophyless season. PSG had won the women's title in France. They hadn't made it. They hadn't won the Champions League, and she sort of like got them back. On their perch, so to speak, won the league again, won the Champions League again, and this at a time when the advantage that Lyon had enjoyed over their domestic and continental rivals was gradually being whittled away. Like the English clubs are so much stronger now, the Spanish clubs are so much stronger now. So I think the Champions League that she won at Lyon and then the final she got to probably counts for a little bit more than some of their previous successes. So we'll see how she gets on at Chelsea.
Very good. In the Men's Premier League, what else we got this weekend? Well, Liverpool, Bournemouth. You got Leicester, Everton. They couldn't, could they? Southampton up against Ipswich. Saints Aaron Ramsdale's faced 40 shots in his 2 matches as a Southampton player so far. 20 in each match. Incredible numbers. West Ham taking on Chelsea. West Ham only had 3 wins in their last 15 matches. Palace against Man United. Palace did the double over United last season. And, Fulham, Newcastle, Aston Villa, Wolves, Spurs, Brentford and Brighton Forest. Colin.
Yeah, there's a lot of games there where at such an early stage of the season, you're already looking at them thinking that they can be quite important in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, we've spoken about the title race in City, Arsenal, but at the bottom, and you've got Leicester, Everton, and obviously Southampton playing Ipswich. Those are automatically 6-pointers, and those games will actually matter more because obviously the points tallies to survive are so much lower that every win counts that
right.
more. So
3 points is proportionally much more important.
Well, I'm not a mathematician, but I would guess it's along those lines.
Could be 10% of your season tally, no?
Well, 36 will keep you up these days. It's good to see we need 40 points mob slowly being phased out.
Are they though? You don't hear people talking about 36 points.
No, but you don't hear as many
Publicly.
managers mention 40 anymore. The magic 40 mark is fading, I would say.
Game's gone. Another cherished childhood memory. There's
obviously the pressure and Sean Dyche at Everton is growing. I think if you had to take an Aston Villa defeat last week in isolation, I think it's why Aston Villa a very tough game, but the manner in which that happened, having gone through a very similar process the week before against Bournemouth, and then to lose on a penalty shootout at home in the League Cup, it's not great. The thing I was looking at here was that there were only 3 managerial changes in the Premier League last season. The first one came in December, which was Paul Heckingbottom at Sheffield United. The season before there were 14.
Right. So Paul Heckingbottom, who was that him with Preston North End? Yeah. It's Paul Heckingbottom, who, of course, was at the helm of Preston North End. Sorry to interrupt, Colin, but yeah.
And so obviously that was almost like an outlier. The 3 in 1 year was particularly low. But the year before that, 2022-23, there was 14 changes, which was
a record. Yeah. I think last season was because everyone kind of knew the 3 promoted teams weren't very good. I think and they might not be very good this season, but I think if Ipswich start to pick up a few points, boardrooms elsewhere might start getting a bit nervous.
Or Leicester this weekend at home to Everton. Jamie Vardy averaging a goal every 2 appearances against the Toffees. One to watch there.
And bagged against Palace at the weekend, so he's on form. And a real sort of vintage Vardy goal as well. Still got it.
Still got it.
Only man to score more than 100 goals in his 30s in the Premier League. He's a marvel.
So many delights to look forward to. Of course, Sunday night we'll be back to review them all. Should mention as well that Spurs Brentford is the Premier League managers as father-in-law derby because both of them were established as firm favourites in our last show when we were discussing which Premier League manager you'd most like to have as your father-in-law. I went Thomas Frank. I think Jay Harris said
around the table. Thomas Frank, though. Do you not think?
It was actually Daniel Story said. Daniel Story said Ange Postecoglou.
I think Frank would have complaints about like a family Airbnb scenario. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can imagine him being very punctilious when it came to like family trips.
Okay. I obviously spoke from a position of ignorance. Who would you have then, Tom?
Who are the cuddly managers? The managers are less cuddly. Is that just because I'm getting older and so I don't look at managers as father figures anymore because they're all like my age.
There you go.
And sometimes even younger.
There you go. Time marching on again.
Fabian Hurtzler, you'd end up being
pretty confusing.
Ange is the most avuncular, isn't he?
I don't
Sean
know that he is.
Dyche.
I don't think he is.
No, too much of an edge.
Yeah.
Only because he got rattled in that interview.
I think
when he puts his arm around you on Christmas Day and says mate and ushers you into the kitchen for a talk, you know that's not going well. That's not good.
Very good. Sunday night, more of that as we react to Premier League Match Day 5. Duncan, you're joining us, I think, for Sunday.
I am indeed.
Well, that's great news. Listener, perhaps you'd like to join us as well. We'll also be on YouTube, putting the show together in Vision. Tom, lovely to see you today.
And you too, James.
Your book, Va Voom.
It's on sale now.
There you go.
Very good.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thanks.
Colin Millar, many thanks.
Thanks for having me on.
Rachel and Charlie in the booth. You listener, we're back Sunday night. Boom. Peace out. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.